Every time my period tracking app reminds me that it's coming again, I feel annoyed. Cramps, emotional breakdowns, and the constant worry of whether there might be blood on my pants, or if I've left a stain on the chair I just sat on. When I used to get my period, I would often curl up in bed in pain, feeling irritated and quietly thinking to myself, why is it that women have to go through this suffering every single month? For a long time, my period was just a huge inconvenience to me. But recently, after reading a lot of anthropological and biological research, I suddenly realized something. We may have been misunderstanding our own bodies all along. Did you know? Women in ancient times, living tens of thousands of years ago, would only experience about 50 periods in their entire lifetime. Today, however, the average woman experiences nearly 450. When I first saw this number, I was genuinely stunned. Why is there such a huge difference? Did ancient humans have different bodies from us? But after digging deeper into the research, I realized the issue isn't the uterus at all. Our bodies today are essentially the same as those of our ancestors, who hunted and gathered in prehistoric societies tens of thousands of years ago. What has truly changed is not our bodies, but our lifestyle. In ancient times, due to limited nutrition, girls often reached puberty later, and once they became adults, most of their lives were either spent pregnant or breastfeeding. Long-term pregnancy and breastfeeding naturally suppress ovulation. In other words, their bodies rarely went through a regular monthly menstrual cycle the way we do today. So in total, they might only have had a few dozen periods in their entire lives. But things are different now. Our nutrition has improved, and puberty comes earlier. More importantly, we now have the freedom to choose how we live our lives. We no longer need to spend most of our lives constantly pregnant or breastfeeding. We study, work, travel, and pursue our own paths. And when women are no longer continuously pregnant or breastfeeding, the ovulation cycle runs regularly again. As a result, periods happen much more frequently. That's why modern women experience around 450 periods in a lifetime. So many of the fatigue and inconvenience we feel every month are not necessarily because our bodies are broken. It's more like we are living in a modern, civilized world with bodies that evolved for ancient survival conditions. Our bodies are still running on systems designed tens of thousands of years ago. At this point, you might naturally ask, if in ancient times there were no sanitary pads, no painkillers, not even proper bathrooms, how did women deal with their periods? That's also what I was most curious about. And the more I researched, the more I realized ancient women were far more resourceful than we imagine. They were true masters of survival. Anthropologists have found that many ancient women used a plant called sphagnum moss. It looks like ordinary moss, but it has an extremely strong ability to absorb liquid. Even more interestingly, it also has mild antibacterial properties. In addition to plants like this, they also use soft animal fur, bundles of dried grass, and similar materials. Women living near the sea sometimes even use natural sea sponges. Although ancient life was far from comfortable, women were constantly finding ways to take care of their bodies. And what I'm about to say next is what shocked me the most. In many history books, we often see references to ancient tribes, placing menstruating women in separate red tents. For a long time, I assumed this was because ancient people saw menstruation as dirty or impure, which is why women were isolated. But anthropological research suggests the reality may have been more complex. In ancient times, when men bled, it usually meant injury, danger, or even death. But women could bleed every month and still remain healthy, even capable of giving life. To early humans, this may have seemed like something mysterious and unexplainable. So in some tribal cultures, menstruation was not necessarily associated with shame. Instead, It may have been seen as something special, sacred, even worthy of respect. Some women who entered red tents were not simply being exiled. In some ways, it may have even been a rare period of rest in a physically demanding survival environment. But the question is, if menstruation was not originally shameful, why did it gradually become something we cannot openly talk about? Why, even today, do many girls still hide sanitary pads up their sleeves when buying them? The answer has a lot to do with who wrote history. As human societies moved into urban civilizations, the authority to speak about the female body gradually fell into the hands of male physicians and philosophers. And many of them did not truly understand the female body. In ancient Greece and Rome, there was a widely accepted but absurd theory at the time. To make it easier to understand, I'll call it the human pressure cooker theory. Many male doctors believed that men could release toxins from the body through sweat, but women were seen as wet and weak. So they believed women could only release toxins through monthly bleeding. From that point on, menstruation gradually came to be described as something unclean. And in the 1st century AD, things became even more extreme. A famous Roman scholar named Pliny the Elder wrote seriously in his works that if a menstruating woman walked through farmland, crops would wither. If she looked into a mirror, it would lose its shine. If she approached a beehive, the bees might die. And some even claimed that her presence could dull sharp blades. When I first read these accounts, I almost laughed out loud. If women truly had such powers, why would ancient Rome even need weapons? But what's even more disturbing is this. Many people at the time actually believed it. Because they couldn't understand the female body, they began to fear it, and eventually demonize it. And this sense of shame slowly became embedded in culture over time. Even more absurdly, this fear eventually influenced real medicine. In the Middle Ages, if a woman had heavy menstrual bleeding, how did some doctors treat it? They would grind dried toads into powder, place it in a pouch, and tie it around the woman's waist. Because they believed toad powder was dry, and therefore could somehow absorb blood and moisture from the female body through mysterious forces. Looking at it now, it sounds completely ridiculous. But what truly makes me uncomfortable is something else. Today, in museums, we can still see bronze swords, armor, and weapons used by men thousands of years ago. Because metal survives time. So history is filled with wars, kings, and conquests. But what about women's history? The materials ancient women used to care for their bodies. Moss, wool, sea sponges, papyrus-like plants. All of these are organic and biodegradable. They disappeared. And with them, much of the real history of women's bodies disappeared as well. What remains are fragments reconstructed from historical records written largely by men. Today, we finally have real science. We know that menstruation is not detox. We know that women do not kill bees just by looking at them. But the centuries of shame have not completely disappeared. They still linger like ghosts in the subconscious of many women. That is why I wanted to make this video. I want to tell every woman who has ever felt embarrassed by her period or seen her body as a burden. Our bodies were never meant to be defined by fear or shame. They are incredibly precise and powerful systems of life. They are the legacy of women who survived in ancient wildernesses using moss, wool, and sea sponges, generation after generation. For thousands of years, misunderstanding and fear have hidden the true strength of the female body. But today, we finally get to see it clearly again. And I'd also really like to hear your story. When you got your first period, did any elders tell you any strange or extreme taboos? Like not washing your hair, not touching cold water, or not eating ice? Feel free to share your experience in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how many old beliefs are still living quietly among us today. If this video gave you even a slightly new understanding of your body, please like it. It really supports my work. I'm Yo-Yo, a 35-year-old woman still learning to understand my own body. I hope we can continue to understand ourselves more gently. See you next time.